Myself and my wife Christine, we've been doing the Florin Time of Remembrance for 20 years plus. And I had thought about, doing this kind of program, and maybe it was time perhaps to say, that's enough, we're preaching to the choir. However, 9/11 occurred, and all of a sudden, the thin veneer of tolerance was ripped off, and now the Arabs and the Muslims get the brunt of it all. And it seems as though, what has happened in the past, is no longer remembered, and therefore, I think the program that we've done comes to find to be very important, because it is not only that fact that it had occurred and I was there, but also to remember the fact that it had occurred, because as Eric Moeller in our last presentation stated, governments and others don't want you to remember. They want you to forget so that they can do whatever they think is appropriate. And really, I think to the extent that we can, we need to renew our efforts to keep on going with this thing to the extent that we can. With my passing generation, there will be few of us who remember that it had occurred. My younger brother, who's 4 years younger than I, he has very vague memories because he was too young. And my memories of camp are of a 7-year-old, basically. I remember morning glory, because that's what they grew there. And I remember things like that, which are sort of snatches of memory that I recall as a kid. And in one sense, when I reflect back on it, I was glad that I was a kid. If I was a teenager and understood what was going on, boy, I would have been mad. And so that's one positive out of all of this, that it did happen, but at the same time, I can recall enough of it and recall some of the interesting things and snatches of memory here and there. But hopefully, it will never happen again. But you never know. It's one of those things. When Pearl Harbor occurred, I remember it very distinctly. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the house, and my uncle was listening to the radio, and he said that, the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. I said, oh my. There were things that were going to happen, but really didn't know the magnitude of it all. So it was quite, I remember it to this day. We packed. I recall going to train station and being carted to Fresno Assembly Center, located in the fairgrounds of the Fresno County Fair. And one of the things I remember about that was all the buildings look exactly the same. There was nothing distinctive about them other than the fact that they had addresses stenciled on each of the barracks. And so I was so fearful of getting lost that I memorized where I lived. And to this day, I remember my address as being J104. That means I lived in Block J, Building 10, apartment number 4. It's one of those things that's stuck in my mind. It was Jerome, Arkansas. I vaguely remember I was about 7 to 8 years old at the time, going to school. I think I had Mrs. Anderson as a teacher. I still remember that. And playing in the wood pile because they had cut cords and cords of wood, because that's the way they heated the apartments. And one of the things that I did in camp, my parents told me about, which was sort of interesting. After school, I went with a friend to play at his house, his apartment. Well, there are no phones in camp, and so there was no way of letting my parents know what I'd done. I come to find out that they were getting frantic looking for me because it was getting dark here I was, a kid, first grader, playing away, having a great time. And when I finally went home, I heard about it. I didn't do that again.
Now, how many were in your family? How many
My family consisted of my parents and a younger brother and myself. Oh, that reminds me. Our family number was 22004. I still remember it to this day. And that was a number that was given to us that tagged all of our baggages and all of the things that when we moved from camp to camp. As a kid, I had a lot of fun because I had a lot of kids to play with. My parents, basically had to leave everything behind. It was hard for me to, I really didn't understand or comprehend the magnitude of it all until later. And when, it was quite a, little years after we even got back that we had to basically start over again, that I realized, how much they had lost. My father had just purchased a brand new tractor, Caterpillar tractor, and it was practically worn out by the time we got back 2 years later, and because everybody else used it. And so it was sort of tough, and it was tough to make a living. We raised grapes, Tokay grapes. My parents had 30 acres of grapes, and that's what I used to do when growing up, going through high school. And one of the things that I remember thinking about is that I didn't want to be a farmer. I got to get an education to not do this thing anymore. It was too much hard work. So that's one of the things I remember about not being a farmer. It was sort of sudden in terms of, I think the neighbors didn't expect us back. I had heard stories of one family that one of the early ones that came back, and they went shopping and at a market and bought meat and groceries and other things. Well, they were telling us about the fact that the shopkeeper was so surprised that he forgot to ask about the coupons that were necessary for meat at the time. So, those were some of the things. And I recall an incident at school with another classmate having some hassles when I returned back to school again. So that was part of the adjustment back.
Because when you came back, you're old enough to remember then.
Yeah, the years in camp were between the ages 7 through 10. So I don't have too many photographs during that time because it was illegal to have cameras until later. So not too much of Fresno. There are some pictures of Arkansas that myself and my brother, we had, and some of my grandparents were there too. But it's like the part of the family album is void of pictures, unlike today when everything is digital and you can take one practically every second. So that's one thing I miss about that part in time, because there's not that many pictures remaining.